Good evening and welcome to my show, complete with new titles. Hope you like them and the funky rock music. This show is going to be very exciting. I'd like to dedicate it to my dad, actually, because it's his year anniversary of his death tomorrow. And once upon a time, back in 1969, my dad sat with me and we watched the moon landings on the telly, the Apollo 11 one in particular, in 1969. It's now 53 years later. My dad told me at the time, don't believe a word of it. It's all nonsense. No one's gone to the moon. No one will ever go to the moon. He told me to question everything, which I've continued to do to this very day. And tonight, my guest is someone who also questions everything, a filmmaker, journalist, and writer, director, producer, Bart'S Sibrel, who has made 4 films. One of my favorite moon landing hoax films, which is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Welcome to the show. People have been chatting amongst themselves, the audience, and coming up with lots of very interesting questions. I want to ask you a few things first. So obviously you're like me, an investigative journalist. You've been doing it for decades. I mean, that film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, you made in 2001. So that's 21 years ago, amazingly. And I was going to ask you, if you were going to make that film again now, would you change anything? Yeah,
here's what I would change. I would not do it.
Really? Why?
Well, I mean, I originally turned down the project. Basically, I grew up believing the moon landings are real, had about 15 color pictures on my wall of Apollo 11 that my father in the Air Force gave me at age 4, which I was when they allegedly went to the moon.
Yeah.
And I saw those on my wall every day, 10 years in a row, 3,650 times thinking they were real. So then I'm 14 and I see a guy on TV who worked for NASA during the Apollo program who said it was fake. I'm like, So I go back to my bedroom walls. You see, fortunately, the idea caught me as an open-minded 14-year-old. And sure enough, you could see the fake backdrops. It was like my eyes were wide shut. And then fast forward another 10, I'm 24, and I'm producing something as a filmmaker for the guy who produced the show as I was a 14-year-old. And I said, you remember that guy on your show who said we didn't go to the moon? What's his name? He says, I don't know. Called the San Francisco office. I did. They said they were days away from deleting 10-year-old files. Had I called a day or so later, I would have never been able to put in touch with them.
Wow.
So I'm in touch with Bill Casing, and being a filmmaker, he suggests that I make a film about it. So I take off about 6 months, and I find that the shadows intersect at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart in sunlight when they should be parallel. That means electrical lighting. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, I can tell you.
Yeah.
And then 2 of the 3 astronauts never give interviews, or rarely.
Yeah.
And that seems odd.
Yeah, I want to talk about all these things.
Yeah, and then the administrator resigns days before the first mission. Kind of suspicious. So I think, there's a possibility, at least 1 out of 4, that they were fake. And I realized, I like puzzles. I'm kind of relentless, as you learned in Astronauts Gone Wild. I said to myself, if anyone could, figure this out, it'd be me. And then I thought, if they didn't go and I start looking into it, could be dangerous. So I turned down the project. I said, I'm not going to risk my life for what Nixon did. No, thank you. And 5 years go by. I have another client who says they'll do me a favor. They'll get one of my scripts to a famous Hollywood producer. I'm like, all right. If I do them a favor, what? They say, read the Bible. And I'm like, what? They're a Christian, I guess. So I got a 1-year Bible that divided the Bible into 365 daily reads. And over the next 5 years, I ended up reading the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. Now, I wasn't a Christian, but it did develop in me a conviction of right and wrong, and light and darkness, and truth and lies, and judgment, that I think it just kind of feels like it makes sense that there's a judgment for how we live our life here. And I said,
and good and evil as well, would you say?
That's right. So I said to myself, Jackie, I said, if they faked it, that's actually more profound historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? I mean, let's say they could plant a flag and do this and do that, whoop-de-doo, or they lied about it, murdered people, embezzled money. That's more profound historically than if they'd actually went. And I said, if this is true, this truth needs to be known to mankind, or we can't get any better. I mean, when George Orwell said, whoever controls the past controls the future, that
Yep.
means as long as our government is saying in the past, they control the past. Every year, Apollo films how great it is. Whoever controls the past, that it's real when it's not, they're controlling our future and they're criminals. So it's
Yep.
dangerous. So I said, this is an important truth mankind needs to know. I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well go out in a blaze of glory fighting for what's right. So I changed my mind, and as God would have it, very shortly after that, I meet a millionaire who's a board member of an aerospace company building rockets for NASA, who knows that they're fake. He says it's his patriotic duty. He gave me $1 million to produce these films, and I was
Wow.
producing it under the theory it might be true. Until one day I pop in a tape. It says, don't show to the public on the screen. And they're faking part of the mission photography, as you just saw. And a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, over and over and over again, right in front of your eyes, creating a 1-foot model of the Earth with the CIA on the third track of audio, faking a 4-second radio delay. And
that wasn't for public consumption, was it? That film,
that's
that
right.
where they're blocking out with
that's right. And so that convinced me. I wasn't convinced until I saw that. And even when I saw it, it took me a minute or two. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Let me figure this out. They're faking being halfway to the moon. That's clear. So if they're faking being halfway to the moon, it means they can't go halfway to the moon. And seeing how they have all identical equipment, if Apollo 11's equipment can't leave Earth orbit, then they never did. They didn't go. And I just was in shock. First, I wept quietly. Is this our world? Is this the world that we live in? That our governments are so corrupt, that our greatest accomplishment is a fraud? How sad is that? And then I started fearing for my life. I had a blind roommate, a toddler son, and I'm like, I've got proof that the moon landing is fake in my house. What have I gotten myself into? So the book that just came out, Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list, which you can get at Sibrel.com, in audio, I read it myself, or Kindle or print. I go into these never before discussed backstory events, including me being drugged and kidnapped by the CIA, escaping their custody, peeing in a cup to prove it that I've been drugged by truth serum, because I was so drugged, I was vomiting. And
you might have to go back to the start of that story. What happened? What happened? You were kidnapped by the CIA.
Well, I mean, this is supposed to be an hour show. It's about an hour story. I don't know if you have any other questions, but basically,
well, they can buy the book to get the full story. But in a nutshell,
yeah. So basically, I figured, I'm trying to convince people that the moon landings are fake. That's already a hard pill to swallow. If I throw in I'm being followed and drugged, they'll think I'm doubly crazy. So I thought, well, I'm trying to move on to feature filmmaking, put this project behind me with this book. I'll go ahead and tell what happened. So right after I found that tape, I'm popping it in, I'm crying and just freaked out that I'm in danger. I call up Bill Casing and I say, look, we're in trouble. Do not sleep where you slept last night. And as soon as I said that, I hear, I can hear him like, I can just barely hear him. Can't make out what he says. I'm like, Bill, leave your house. Leave your house. Don't go to any place, shelter in some place they don't know. And I'm fearing for the guy's life. I go to church. It's a Wednesday night. There's like 350 people there meeting in a school auditorium. And I stay like at least an hour late talking to the elders. What do? They said, look, Bart, you've bitten off more than you could chew. You're in Nashville. CNN's in Atlanta. You need to get in your car and take the tape and drive to Atlanta. Well, earlier that day, I immediately copied the tape. It's a big Betacam professional product, and put it in 2 or 3 or 4 different locations and potentially mailed one too to somebody. I was like, okay, I got to first thing copy this thing and get it out of here so that if I die, it's still out there.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving church, and I'm like, me and the person are like the last 2 cars, and we're about a couple of blocks away from this public swimming wave pool, which closes at sundown. Now it's like 2 hours after sundown. And as I'm pulling out, there's this van backed into the driveway of the closed business as if he's waiting for somebody, ready to pull out, backed in. He didn't go by any of the other 300 cars that went by him when church, dismissed. But when I went by him, boom, pulls out. And I'm like, oh, that guy was waiting for me. So I immediately pull over to the shoulder, put on my brakes, and I say to myself, I'm going nowhere. I got all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere until this guy is in front of me. I see him in the rearview mirror about, 50 yards back, stopped in the middle of the road. He realizes, oops, he pulled out too soon, gave himself away. He's like, apparently figuring out what to do, and I'm like, I got all night. I'll stay right here for 5 hours if that's what it takes. So eventually, the guy figures, well, I blew it. We'll send somebody else. So he passes me, gets on like this parkway, 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other, medium in the middle, going back toward town. So I remember this famous book, The Art of War. It says, know your enemy. So I follow him. As soon as he passes me, I get behind him. He gets on the parkway. I get on the parkway. And I say, I want to take a look at this guy. So I pull up alongside of him. He's in this, American van, looks like nobody, no black suit, you know, tank top, dice from the dashboard, looks like, just an average American. And I look him in the eye, and he looks me in the eye. And let me put it this way, Jackie. Have you ever seen those documentaries where they show a great white shark and they hold like a big piece of beef outside and the thing jumps out of the water to get it? You ever seen that? And if you look at the shark's eye, there's nobody at home. No, spiritually.
Yeah. Dead.
It doesn't have a soul.
Mm.
It doesn't care if your grandmother falls over, your wife, your daughter, your son. They're going to eat them. They don't care.
Mm.
And that's how this guy looked. I've never seen it in a human being in my entire life. And I was about to see it a couple of more times. So as soon as I look at him and he looks at me, immediately my car shuts off. Electricity, engine, boom. An ex-military friend tells me it was an EMP from a satellite. They just zapped me. So I'm coasting to the side of the road. He's, going 55 or whatever, goes past me to the next exit to loop around, to go to the next exit, to come back on again, to be right behind me. So I, walk across the medium. I want to be away from this guy. He loops around a second time. I walk to the other side. He loops around a third time. I walk to the other side. He loops around again. I walk to the other side. He figures he's getting nowhere. And this other car, boom, is right there beside him. They're talking to each other through an open window. So a taxi stops by. Thank you, God. And he has a phone. I'm on talking to him, the police saying, I got to meet you at this place downtown, bright lights. And I show them my media credentials, and they say, look, you need private security. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. So I find another cab driver who I hire to drive me from Nashville to CNN, about 5 hours away, from midnight to 5 in the morning. And I tell him beforehand, I said, look, I want you to know what you're getting into here. Okay. You see this big tape, this huge videotape. It's a broadcast tape. Here are my media credentials from NBC. This is a tape of them faking part of the moon landing. Do you understand? And we need to get this quickly to CNN before I get in more trouble.
How did he respond to that?
He was excited. He said, I always knew it was fake. Let's do it. And of course, he's making $400 or whatever it was back then.
Yeah.
So we get there before CNN opens. At least my contact there comes in at 8 or 9 or something. And we roll into a hotel around 5. And I figure, well, let's just sleep for a couple hours, set my alarm. And when we come out of the hotel room, there's a couple of payphones side by side in the hotel. And I had memorized, for such an emergency, my AT&T access numbers, to call in and bill me or whatever. And I'm calling like the news director, the executive producer of the film, who was the rocket, designer guy, and telling him where I am. And I didn't notice it, but the cab driver notices there's this guy around the hallway of the rooms kind of peeking out, looking at me. I thought he was waiting for the phone, but then there was an empty one right beside me. The cab driver says, we need to get out of here. So we pop in the cab, and as soon as we pull out of the driveway of the hotel, another cab comes in, and they're immediately surrounded by the police. They stopped the wrong cab. So in these situations, I always say to myself, Jackie, what would I do if I was them? Well, I'm like, well, I would have cops on the payroll in every town, of 100,000 or more. So I go to CNN. I'm surrounded by the cops. I say, can I leave? They won't let me enter the building. One of them is a captain. So I tell them why they're here. One of the three is like freaking out. He now knows why they stopped me. So I walk away, and I make myself around an alley trying to run away. And I guess I take too much time. I'm surrounded by, motorcycle cops, an unmarked van. And I hear them say behind me, where's the thing? First of all, they immediately handcuff me and take the tape. That's what they do first. Secondly, I hear there's like 4 or 5 people here. And I think they're all cops, they're like on the payroll, Illuminati, Masons, whatever. And because they can go anywhere at any time. They're a cop, right? And so I hear them behind me say, where's the thing? Oh, I thought you had the thing. No, he has the thing. Oh, what's the thing? And the thing is, this little, it looks like one of those bracelets you get when you go into the hospital, except there's nothing on it. And they're handling it with rubber gloves, and they put it on my wrist, and within 1 minute, I'm like, feel like I'm on LSD or something. See, that's where all your veins, it's absorbed, right? And I start throwing up, and just we don't have time to go into it, but basically, a lawyer comes out who wanted apparently to have a CNN address, but the only way he could afford it was a back alley entrance.
Yeah.
And had he not come out, not sure if I would be having this conversation. I tell him, look, I'm a journalist. I'm being illegally arrested. Here's my name. Here's my number, and so forth. And I hate to say this, to make a long story short, basically, I escape custody. I make my way back to Nashville. I know someone in Nashville to give me a ride, and I pee in a cup, and I say, I got him. I'm going to prove that I was drugged by this exotic drug. So I pee in a cup. I give it to a friend to put in a lab in his name, not mine. A few days later, he calls me up and says, well, there's a problem with the lab. And I said, yeah, what problem? He says, well, strange thing, they had a break-in over the weekend. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, another strange thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample. All this is in the book. And I know that's kind of a sidetrack, but if you want to know why the moon landings are fake, I can tell you that too.
So it's Moon Man, and you can get it from Amazon if anyone's interested. I've ordered mine. It's not arrived yet. So we've got people asking a few questions, and they're all talking amongst themselves as well. And I've still got questions. So someone mentioned the Gus Grissom cover-up. I don't know much about that. Do you know much about the astronaut?
This is something by Betty Grissom. I interviewed her for about 3 hours, and I interviewed her son, Scott Grissom, for about 2 hours around the research of the funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Now, remember, we had $1 million here to work with. And they both told me this stuff, and they said, please don't put it in the film and don't write about it, basically, until she dies, So what basically happens in these 5 hours of interview with the Grissom family, and most people don't know this, is that her husband and the gentleman's father was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, Apollo 1, right? And he was the most beloved of all the astronauts because when his Mercury capsule splashed down in the ocean, the explosive bolts went off, it shot off the door, it started to sink. He had all these nickels in his pockets, rolls of nickels to give to the school children, of his son. And when he confessed at a press conference, that was kind of dumb, I'm sinking here, I wish I had all those nickels, everyone laughs. And then someone asked him a question, Jackie. They said, were you afraid? And he said, of course I was afraid. And it's just like, he's so real. NASA said that he's going to be our guy. He's going to be our guy. Except he was a whistleblower. He was preparing and had sent reports to the Pentagon and his senator about how they are a decade away or more from going to the moon, not 2 years. And they wouldn't fix anything because they knew they were only going to do Earth orbit, and they hadn't informed the astronauts yet of the plan to fake it. And so he couldn't figure out why. So when he started making waves about it, he took a picture of him hanging a lemon on the top of the rocket and brought the media in without permission. And he publicly declared the rocket a lemon. And somebody said, that's enough.
Yeah.
And so his wife told me this. She said, Bart, the day before he died, he comes home from work and says, hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad. Never seen them there before until today. I wonder why. The very next day, he dies in an accident, right? Now it's a warning. Not only do they get rid of him, they make it look like an accident because they killed 2 people incidentally rather than targeting him, right? So it looks less like an intention. And then it's a warning to anyone else who won't cooperate, you see? And so the second to last chapter of the book, Moon Man, which you can get at Sibrel, Sibrel.com, is called NASA's Greatest Fear.
You seem very fearless yourself, though. Do you ever get a bit scared?
Yeah, and I can tell you what happened in the last 2 years. It's still happening. Okay, prior to the book coming out and the video that just came out, which he didn't want me to release it until he died. That's why it just came out. And so basically, she told me this information that they have forensic evidence that the CIA, sabotaged that particular spacecraft. And so my point is, in the last chapter of the book, NASA's Greatest Fear is, Let's say they faked the moon landing and nobody died. Not a single person was killed to cover it up. Then I would agree with that person. What difference does it make? And it's like, yeah, it's just one more counterfeit Picassos, counterfeit science, counterfeit moon landings, whoop-de-doo. But here's what they don't want the public to know and why they're so concerned about the moon landing fraud coming out. And you type in moon landing fraud, and all you get is why it's not a fraud, right? It's for the following reason. If the truth came out about the moon landing being a fraud, the very next investigation would be what happened to the Apollo 1 fire, where the dead man's wife and son, who's a 747 pilot, says he was killed by the CIA. They're obviously connected. So what that means is, you see, is that not only did they charge us an equivalent of $200 billion to fake the moon landing and kept probably 75% of that money for who knows what, not only did we pay for that, we pay for that with our federal taxes. It's 1/3 of our labor. You know, when I go to work and I work 9 hours, 3 of those are simply to satisfy the federal government, who then uses that money to fake moon landings for me. If they killed nobody, that would be the end of it. But now that really means is not only did they take our hard-earned money to lie to us, those CIA guys who killed Grissom and the other 2 men, they were paid by our tax dollars. And whatever hardware they used to rig that fire, that material was bought with our tax dollars. So not only are our hard-earned labor being used to deceive us, it's being used to murder our brethren citizens for exposing their crimes. And that's why they do not want the moon landing fraud to come out. If I may add one more thing, even though the Kennedy witness assassination list, they say, is 200 people, and even though the Gulf of Tonkin, which McNamara admitted the CIA just made that up, that led to a death of 1 million people, and even though 9/11, 3,000 engineers say it's impossible for a pinhole airplane to bring that down, even though that killed 3,000 people, and even though the moon landing fraud killed the fewest number of people, out of all those frauds, it's the one that, if exposed, will bring about the most change, because it's burned in people's hearts. They prayed for them, they waved their flag, they're teared up. And if they find out that their government lied to them about that, they will be angry and demand change. And that's why the government doesn't want it to come out, doesn't want to find out that they also murdered people to cover that up. Not only lying in such a way that will break their hearts more than anything else.
Yeah, you know the film Capricorn 1.
Absolutely.
That was obviously about the moon landing hoax.
Obviously.
They changed it to Mars, didn't they, at the last minute?
That's right. Yep.
What can you tell us about that? Because there wasn't the script stolen or something? It was some kind of
Well, not exactly. Bill told me that they read his book called We Never Went to the Moon. Someone thought it would make a great movie. They didn't want to insult America by saying the moon landings are fake. So, you know, let's flip it a little bit and say it's Mars.
Yeah.
Basically, the first proof that I discovered that the moon landings are fake are shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. That's impossible to happen in sunlight. You want proof that the moon landings are fake? One picture will prove it. 90-degree shadows from objects 5 feet apart when they're always parallel in sunlight. Go out and stand beside somebody or do a screen share of an example, right? That's all your proof you need. So it was the filmmakers in Hollywood who saw that's electrical lighting. That's what motivated him to make this film. Now they backtracked, and if you get the, you know, deluxe edition, whatever, on the, you know, special commentary track, they're saying, no, we really went. Now, why would somebody who thinks that Bill Gates is the greatest person on earth make a film fictional about what a scoundrel he is? Now, so obviously they made the film because that they believed it. If they thought it was real, they would never insult their god of the moon landings being real. But now, for whatever reason, they're backtracking on it. It's a beautiful film.
Yeah,
whether
I love
the moon landings are fake or not, it's actually extremely well made.
Do you think that Hollywood does this weird kind of double, triple, quadruple bluff where they kind of wrap up the truth in fiction, and then so when people hear about the truth, say about the moon landing hoax, they then think, oh no, that was in a film, that's just made up, you know? So it's this kind of twisted way of giving the people truth, but then taking it away at the same time.
Yeah, Woodward and Bernstein, after uncovering Watergate, discovered an interdepartmental CIA memo where they disclosed that they have 400 CIA authors at every major newspaper, television, and radio station in the country, including NBC, ABC, and so forth and so on, and that they're constantly producing films in Hollywood that appear to be fictional, that are like, we love the FBI, whatever. So when this whole COVID thing started, I went back and I looked at Contagion, and guess who the hero is in the film Contagion? The
Who?
CDC. The
Of course.
CDC is the hero. And guess who the villain is? An alternative media reporter. You can't get more propaganda, government control than that.
Well, it's predictive programming as well, isn't it? The large
whatever you want to call it.
telling
I've
people
asked
what to
sometimes, is
expect.
there subliminal advertising? And I'm like, they don't have to. I see a picture of a pizza on TV. You know what I'd like right now? I think I'd like a pizza.
Yeah.
So
Can I ask you?
it's pretty direct, and it can be direct. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, subtle. Direct works too.
When it actually dawned on you that the moon landings were a hoax, how did you feel? I mean, growing up believing it. I mean, I grew up not believing it. My dad told me when I was 7, because I'm a bit older than you. My dad told me, it's not real. No one's gone to the moon, and no one's ever going to go to the moon. And I looked at it and went, yeah. So I kind of knew from that point, because I trusted and believed my dad. But for someone who's grown up believing it to be real and having that immense pride as well, for then to find out as an adult that it was all a lie, how does that make you feel? And how some people aren't able to change their view like that, whereas you were able to do that?
Well, I was coming from a different point, because basically I eventually did become a believer in God, and which the way that you show that is you simply stop sinning to the best of your ability. I mean, if you claim to be a Christian, you can't be sleeping around, or cheating on your wife or stealing or whatever. And so I tried to, purify my life and do what's right. And when you do that, it kind of opens your mind to the truth. The Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of Truth. So if you don't have the Holy Spirit in you, then I say you can't discern truth. So once I started repenting, once I kicked out that sin, the Holy Spirit came in, and I started seeing the whole world differently. Now, had that not happened, I probably would have been mad at the government, or mad at Neil Armstrong, but instead I just wept quietly, because it was like, this is the world I live in.
Did you forgive them for doing what they've done?
Absolutely, I forgive them.
I mean, they look tortured. Armstrong in particular just looked like such a tortured soul from when he first came back from the moon at that press conference, lying through his teeth and hating every minute of it, and then he seemed miserable from that point on until he died. And he died a few years ago, didn't he?
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly.
I have some information that may indicate that he could very well be alive, and didn't want to deal with the 50th anniversary questions, you see?
Yes, yeah.
And let me tell you about the other strange thing that happened recently.
Yeah.
We're talking about what's going on recently with the CIA, oh, by the way, how many CIA agents does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Well, go on.
Well, I can tell you, but I have to kill you.
Hey, very good.
So basically, while I've been writing Moon Man for 15 years.
Really?
And to edit the book, I spent 2 years. And it was in the process of getting the book ready that I was put in touch with the person who was there at the time. Can you imagine? Just in time to put in the book. Well, I basically, while I'm editing it, I'm just, before I publish this thing, I want to double check the details. Did I get this right, the dates right, and this right, and the, whatever. And after I do that follow-up, the person I'm talking to, their house is broken into. Now, they have a deluxe security alarm, cameras, keypad, but people don't realize that alarm is hooked up to your phone line, which means someone could listen to your password as you touch the keypad, right?
Yeah.
So they figure out he's, going shopping, and every time he goes shopping, he's out for 4 hours. So they go in broad daylight, and they take all the documentation about this particular matter, and comes back. His house is ransacked, and everything that he had, except a picture or two that they overlooked, was taken.
Is this Gene?
Correct. All the years of work and painstaking work was on the guy's computer, and that's why they took the computer, was their main target. And then a couple of days after that, he's literally visited by men in black who tell them if he ever speaks to me again, he and his wife might disappear. So what I did is I called the FBI in his region. I called the White House press secretary, And I called a senator on the United States Intelligence Committee, and I told him, look, this is what's going on. This guy's in danger. The CIA, they committed several felonies, and they're harassing, my source, and please do something about it. And I guess they did. And but he wouldn't talk to me for like a year until he finally said, what's the right way of saying it? Forget them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make them live my life any differently. So
I listened to his testimony earlier, actually, and that's on your website as well. It's like 20-minute film of him giving his, and he sadly died in February this year, didn't he? So
that's right. We have basically, he recorded something in 2020 that he didn't want me to release until after he was dead. I figure, well, the anniversary of the publication of the book is coming up, which I chose September 11th intentionally, right? It was published on September 11th of last year, and I released this video on September 11th of this year. I said, well, that'll work out. And then just a little side note, right as I'm finished doing the finishing touches on this video, my computer dies and the monitors are catching on fire. How can they do that remotely? I have no idea. But I got it off my computer and uploaded it, and there you go.
Well, you've definitely got some friends in high places, but why do they care about what you think, and why do they listen to you? Like when you put in a word there for Gene,
well,
why are you able to do that? How?
Well, basically, in 1991, Apollo 15 astronaut James Irwin becomes a born-again Christian. And you can imagine my surprise if I get a phone call from one of the astronauts. I'm normally tracking them down. So imagine if I say, excuse me, oh, it's Buzz. Sorry, let's take a break. So Bill Casey at that time was the leading investigator, and he gets a call from one of the Apollo astronauts because they know about his book, being on Oprah and all that. The guy says, I've become a born-again Christian. We need to have a serious talk about the contents of your book. Call me at this number 3 days from now. And 3 days later, the astronaut was dead of a heart attack. Now, all that to say, that means either the astronaut's phone or Bill's phone are monitored or both. So when I started talking excited, I mean, it's, calling up Bill Casey, look what I found. You won't believe it. They really didn't go to the moon. They really didn't go. He's like, well, Bart, I told you. I'm like, no, you don't understand. They really didn't go. He's like, well, Bart, I told you. Well, they were listening and all of that. They knew I had this videotape, but they had not seen it. So they weren't about to let it go to CNN and my friend there without them seeing it first. So that's why, they stopped me at church, stopped me at CNN, and drugged me and so forth and so on. So these phone calls are being monitored between, me and this source of who was there at Cannon Air Force Base when they filmed the thing, the dates, the code name, a list of 15 names of eyewitnesses who were there that President Johnson gave him. I guess they don't want this to go public because otherwise they wouldn't have threatened him with death, right? That means they don't like it going public. I mean, the film, the upload right here that I uploaded, it was like doubling views every 12 hours. And when I did a search, top of the line, search top of the line, search to the top of the line, nowhere there. But the one that I did after it, an interview about it, had the kind of the same name. It shows up, and then an hour later, it's not there. And now the view count is way down, moving up a little bit. So they can't take it down because that would just mean I'm right. They know that. So, but they're trying to make sure a few people see it. And I guess the cat's out of the bag. See, if I were Neil Armstrong, I have a friend, hello there if you're watching, who always says hindsight is 2020. And this is what I think happened. And it's just deduction, okay? They killed the Apollo 1 crew. Neil Armstrong steps up. They say, hey, we want you to fake the moon landing. He says, no, thank you. Because at that time, I think he was a man of integrity. And then they turn up the heat a little bit and they say, well, if you don't, we'll kill you. Well, the guy's a test pilot who flies aircraft that's never been flown before, and every other time he's ejecting out of it before it crashes. I don't think threatening the guy's life means a whole lot to him. They can't have him resign in front of the public after he was chosen. That's suspicious. So then they threatened the life of his wife and kids. I'm sure they did that. That's why he did it. And there's not a single still picture of him on the moon. Not a single one.
No, there isn't. No.
Went to the national. He didn't want his picture taken. Now the excuse is he's taking the pictures, but come on, they'd have a backup camera. He said, look, I don't want to be in this thing. You know what I mean? And that's why he doesn't give any interviews and all that. So what I would have done is I would have said, okay, you got me. I'll do it. Full cooperation. I promise. And then at that press conference say, I just wanted to say, by the way, we never left Earth orbit. They threatened me with, threatened my life. And I'd like the FBI, someone to call the FBI to surround and protect my family. That's what I would have done, because what they don't realize, they're afraid of the truth coming out. And they're tricking you. A bully is tricking you. The gangsters trick you. They say if you tell the truth, we'll kill you. But if you tell the truth, it'll kill them. You see?
Yeah.
And they're using a psychological game here. All he had to do was tell the truth, and he would have saved himself.
Mind you, in the story of Capricorn 1, when the astronauts actually find out, if I remember this rightly, that they're not actually going to go to go to Mars at all, aren't their families in a plane arriving or going somewhere, and they said they're going to blow the plane up?
Well, where do you think the writer got that idea? Because it's true, right?
That's what they do.
And it's here. You want something ironic, Jackie? Okay, Elliot Gould plays a journalist uncovering it. I'm a journalist uncovering it. He worked for NBC. I worked for NBC. He was fired for working on the story. I was fired for working on the story. They tampered with his car to where the accelerator pedal got stuck and the brakes wouldn't work. They tampered with my car to where the accelerator pedal stuck and the brakes wouldn't work.
So we've got a case of real life emulating fiction, because that film was 1976, I think.
Yeah, or 78, the release of it, I think.
So they've actually just like put you in a remake of the film, but in real life.
Yeah, I mean, someone could make a film out of my story, make a lot of money, whether we went to the moon or not, or whether they make me look like an idiot or not. I'd sell them the rights. I don't care what you do with it. Help me buy a house, please. Thank you.
Talking of the astronauts, obviously your second film was Astronauts Gone Wild, which obviously opens with that very famous scene of Buzz Aldrin clocking you on the jaw.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Can you tell us a bit about that? How did it get to that point? You're there with your Bible, because the whole premise of the film is you're getting the astronauts to swear or put their hand on the Bible and swear that they've actually been to the moon. I know so much of that film off by heart, Mr. Sibrel. Knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible. So what happened with the Buzz Aldrin incident, where he actually lumps you on?
You're asking really good questions I've never been asked before.
Really?
They're not really about why we didn't go or prove we didn't go. They're more like what's going on behind the scenes. So I'll tell you.
I'm very nosy.
Yeah, me too. I love questions. And you ask very good questions. Never been asked these questions before.
Oh, wow.
And so basically, after the first film came out, I just had the idea, I suppose, from watching courtroom dramas on TV as a kid, people take an oath. I said, well, why don't we just track down these guys and ask them to swear in the Bible? Yeah. He gives me $300,000 to make that movie. The first one is $500,000. This one's $300,000. And we spent about $200,000 editing the press conference or something. So we hire a private detective to track down where these guys live. And just like when I was making a funny thing, I didn't call up NASA and say, please send me footage that might be fake. I told them, hey, look, I'm doing a film about the moon landings, and I'm very thorough. May I please have every video, film, and picture from Apollo 11? Because I figured if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it. So I meticulously went through everything, and lo and behold, I found one big mistake. So I kind of have the same thought with doing Astronauts Gone Wild. Now we have 300,000. I'm like, let's just track down absolutely every single astronaut. And I call them up and I say, I'm Bart Sibrel. I'm doing a film about the moon landings. That's true, right? Be the shrew as a snake and innocent as a dove. And so we go to their homes and we put a TV in front of them and show them this fake footage. And, one guy turns beet red, threatens to shoot me. What happened is I put a TV up, I show him the fake footage, he panics, he turns beet red, gets very angry. Where did you get this? Get out of my house. And he literally kicks me from behind with my back to him.
I know,
And when all this is going on, it's, you're kind of unprepared. So I accidentally leave the wireless microphone on him. And my camera guy in all the commotion accidentally stops, from stopping the recording. So it's still recording in the backseat of the rental car in the guy's driveway, picking up the private conversations crystal clear of the wireless conversations in his home with the door closed before he pulled off.
Yeah.
And he is discussing with his son whether or not to call the CIA to have me assassinated.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
Yeah.
This is why it says
He says
Moon
whack.
Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. So
Yeah.
this is true. Now, here's the thing, Jackie. If they really went to the moon, why would it matter if some silly person thinks they did it on Earth? Why would the CIA have to be called? But if I'm really a journalist and covering a real government fraud of the real CIA, then yeah, I think maybe the CIA. So the fact that they were talking about assassinating me is only proof that I'm right.
And he was like a caged animal. He follows you out into the car park and presses his face up against the camera lens.
That was a different incident. That was Michael Collins.
Yeah, that's Michael Collins.
So Michael Collins never gives interviews. So what we did is we tracked him down. I found where he lived. It was in Marco Island, Florida. I got a rental car that would kind of look like an undercover cop car, and we kind of dressed nicely. And we sat, a couple of houses down on the other side of the road. Each street is a dead end, cul-de-sac. So we're facing the right direction. We can see his house down on the left. And we're going to follow. He won't give an interview, so we're going to follow him to, Walgreens. And as soon as he gets out of the car, I'm going to get out with the microphone and at least ask him a question. That's the only way you can get this guy.
Mr. Collins, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital.
How are you?
Good. I'm the gentleman who found the classified tape from your mission of you faking the window shot, putting the transparency over the window when you were supposedly halfway to the moon when in fact you were in Earth orbit.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I think you must be some kind of wacko.
Okay, well, we have the opportunity to set the record straight.
Well,
we're asking you to...
I'm not on the record right now.
Would ask you to...
Would you please go away?
Well, asking you to swear in the Bible that you orbited the moon.
Would you please go away?
Well, if you really orbited the moon, why won't you swear in the Bible that you did so? Can you tell me why you would have a problem doing that?
Would you please go away?
You don't remember the shot where you put the transparency over the window? We have it being done up to about 10 hours before they supposedly walked on the moon. I just don't understand why if you orbited the moon you wouldn't have a problem about swearing to the Bible on it. Can you tell me why? Are you afraid for the truth to come out?
I think you're some kind of wacko, I really do.
Well, I think it's wacky to not swear to God on something that's supposed to be obvious.
So that's one of the ways we did it. And Neil Armstrong, I go this into the book, his neighbors don't even know that they live next to Neil Armstrong. His mailman doesn't know that the Neil Armstrong he's delivering mail to is the Neil Armstrong, allegedly first man on the moon. I talked to him, yeah, he's a Neil Armstrong, but not the Neil Armstrong. I said, no, he's the Neil Armstrong. And just finding where the guy lived, the police were so impressed. Bart, how did you find that out? And I don't want to say because I don't want them to erase those trails for people in the future, but not that difficult of a puzzle to find a record in a certain way which links him to somebody else and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So and then we had, once his neighbors did know, they thought this reporter's bugging him, so the cops go to his neighbor's house because the cops can't do it because it's a civil violation. They asked the neighbor to get between me and Neil Armstrong's car when he wants to go to dinner or something, and his neighbor literally rams me with their car. I go through a yard, I get out, and then the cops are following me, follow him, and they turn on their lights and pull in front of him and force me to stop. And I can't legally go around if I'm stopped. And of course, I told the judge, and he said, "Yeah, they violated your civil rights, whatever." So it's so sad. They think they're helping this guy like he's some national hero when he's the biggest, well, not the biggest criminal, but he is a criminal. He should have told the truth. He should have, he basically became rich anyway. He was CEO of some company that makes bombs. And the only reason he got that job, it's a token job. Hey, the CEO of our company is the first man on the moon. Do you think he would be CEO of that company if he was a janitor or if they knew he was the biggest liar on the planet? But he cashed in. And so I say that's fair game. And I was polite. And I said, I will give you $1,000 a second to say, I swear to God, I walked on the moon, you give it to charity. He wouldn't do it.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen.
Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the into the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have
give
a
it to
tape.
charity. It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to, why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Sibrel, you do not deserve answers.
Why don't they just put their hand on the Bible and lie?
Well, the two atheists did do that because it doesn't mean anything to them. The other ones do believe in God. And additionally, taking an oath on a Bible on camera is an admissible evidence in a court. It's called a video deposition.
Yeah.
They know that too. And they would be guilty of perjury. Get this. When George Bush Jr. and Cheney, we should call him Cheney Sr., were asked about 9/11, come and testify. After all, you're president and vice president at the time. Can you testify while, this happened on your watch? And they say only if we're not sworn under oath.
That's right. Just the two of them in a room somewhere.
Now imagine this. That law at the end of the film, what it says is we promise to release the documents in 2017 unless the current president at the time changes his mind. The law is meaningless. And so what they're saying is we promise to testify as long as we're given legal permission to lie.
Yeah.
No, I mean, come on. It boggles the mind that they let him get away with that. Why in the world would they not want to testify under oath if they're truth tellers?
Well, it's just very, very clear that they do respect the Bible and that they are maybe God-fearing Christian people. And like you said, they know the possible repercussions of what will happen if they do that.
Yeah,
they don't.
I think in the case of Buzz Aldrin and probably or possibly Neil Armstrong, they didn't do it for fear of God. And I think Cheney and Bush Jr. didn't do it because for legal acumen, knowing not to do that. So
when you actually, you didn't press charges against Buzz Aldrin, didn't he? Claim
you know why? You know why?
Or something.
You know why I didn't?
Go on.
Well, I've been a renter my whole life. I'm still trying to scrape up money to buy my first house, and I'm 57. And so please buy the film rights of the book and make me look like an idiot. I don't care. And I thought I could cash in on this. First of all, we have it on camera that he assaulted me. Yeah. And I said to the district attorney of Beverly Hills, I said, what are you going to do about that? They said, nothing. I said, why not? They said, we will not prosecute a national hero. Now, I thought the scales were just. Now, imagine what would have happened if I punched him. You liar, and I punched him.
Yeah,
I would have gone to jail, and I would have been charged, and I would have had a trial, and I probably would have been in jail for a couple of months to make me look bad.
It was a fierce punch as well. Has he done boxing? He looked like a boxer.
No, may in the face like I've been hit a few times, but you should have seen me after I escaped their custody. I looked like I had been flogged and running through a thorn bush patch for 100 miles. People were looking at me, Bart, what happened to you? Scrapes all up my face, arm, heads. I was just completely unaware of it. But in any case, that's another story. You read it in the book. Yeah. So I thought, well, I got him. I'm going to cash in. This is my house. And then trying to be a Christian, the Bible says, Jesus says, get this. It's so funny how direct it is. Everything's in the Bible. Everything you need for life. It says if someone strikes you on one cheek, do not be
Turn the
offended,
other cheek.
even offer them the other. And
Yeah.
it's for that reason I did not sue him.
Yeah,
So,
that's the Christian thing to do. But then you managed to get an interview with him in his office when he was about to publish his book.
yeah,
and
that
you-
was before the punch.
I mean, do you have Neil Armstrong interviewed already?
No, he doesn't want to be interviewed.
Well, I know.
Why does he not give interviews?
Well, because that's his personal choice. And I guess it's mine, in a way, to do things when they've been researched and worked out as far as a business arrangement. This is not news. This is not an anniversary.
Well, actually, it is. We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before.
Mm.
And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
Well, and to tell us what it is. I mean, it's
Well, I don't know why I should do that.
it's a very unique
Well,
footage.
it may be that I need to see it, and then we sit down and we talk about what you're taking a picture of. I don't see where there's an advantage in it for me to do what you're asking me to do. I see all sorts of pitfalls. I see people who have managed to talk to somebody. Who did you talk to in our office?
I talked with Heather at Tor Books.
Yeah, but is this helping book promotion? Are you going to be putting anything out during the time that I'm marketing books? See, Heather does not represent me for the things you're talking about. She represents a book selling activity.
I think when you see the footage, you'll see that it's
Well-
very extraordinary, one of a kind,
Okay.
behind the scenes type
Yeah.
of footage.
Yeah. Well, if it is, why do you have access to something that no one else has seen before?
Serendipity, I guess. And it was recorded on the 18th
Of what?
of July, 1969.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great, over.
Do you remember this?
On the 18th?
Sure. Okay, Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great, over. Sure. Okay, Roger, Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get the playback, we can sort of correlate what we were seeing. Thank you very much. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light. We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera. South America becomes invisible just off beyond the terminator or inside the shadow. We can see the oceans with a definite blue cast, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth. Roger, the ATC's working real well. The F-22 looks good, over. Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, did you copy, over? Roger, we copied, Charlie. Roger, your transmissions the last couple of times have been about 2 by, over. Okay, how do you read me now? Right, you're 5 by now. Coastline. Now we're coming in. Can't quite make out who that had.
discussing their deception.
What is your
that believed to be
proposition?
confidential.
That we didn't go to the moon?
I know for a fact that you
Here
did.
they discussed that these
I know for
television
a fact that you did
transmissions
not.
were in fact
You know
not
for a fact that we
broadcast
did
live,
not.
as
That's
everyone
correct. And
believed.
you'll see this tape
They were
proves
first
that.
Okay, well,
screened and
I'm not
edited
interested
for
in
playback later.
in satisfying your suppositions when there's all this evidence that we did.
This proves, as you'll see, that you were using the window to demonstrate that you were halfway to the moon when you were
Turn the
doing an
camera
illusion
off,
with
please.
the window.
Sunlight from entering
Turn the camera off.
through the other windows. As
You're
to
full
not
of shit.
It shows that you're in Earth orbit. Now, if the moon is 3 days away, and this is late, on the 18th, how could you possibly walk on the moon 2 days later when this was shot on the 18th? When
You want me to sit in front of a camera while you're taking pictures, you're showing this, and then you want to see my
the reason
reaction?
this was done.
I know for a
is
fact
That's
that you didn't.
slimy journalism. Do you realize that?
Is,
It
if
is
you
You ought to
read,
be ashamed of
if you read the
yourself.
document that I have in here, you'll find that it's
this
not.
is a view of Earth from
That this is a
distance
personal
out of the
plea to do what is
spacecraft.
right.
Well, we sit and we talk about things ahead of
This is the
time.
document that you want to see.
Is place the camera at the back of the spacecraft.
I know for a fact
But
that
what it is you're trying to do is unethical. You don't
Outside
believe
of
that?
which It is completely
No, I do
filled
not.
with the Earth
Well,
in low
then
orbit.
we have a difference of opinion.
The circumference of the window.
this is
then
where you were
appears
using the
to be
window
the
of
diameter
the
of
spacecraft to
Earth at a
appear to be the
distance.
Earth far
With the
away.
darkened walls of the
We got the
spacecraft
raw footage of it. We
appearing
have
to
an
be the
auxiliary
blackness of
track,
space around
so I'm
it.
prompting you when
That
to
is why
speak.
they wanted the interior.
You believe in UFOs?
blocked out the
No, I
You
do
believe
not.
we've been visited by? Well, why do
No, I
you want to
don't.
believe this stuff?
I know for a fact. We've had this analyzed, and this is the window, and you're in, and it's dated by an atomic clock at the Goldstone tracking station, which
It
is on
also
the tape.
causes the Earth to
Well, you're
Said
talking
that-
to the wrong guy. Why
You
don't
were
you
there.
talk to the administrator in NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
I
We're not.
know for a fact
which
that it
together
didn't.
form two different
And this
sides
tape would
of
prove it in
the
a
sun.
court of law.
Subsequently, this
It
tape
would.
was never used.
Why don't
It
you
would.
try? Why don't you put your money into a court of law and see how people laugh at you?
Was inset
You want it-
slightly into the
No
window
one has
Is
to
your
laughed.
camera working?
illusion of the
No,
Earth's
no one has laughed.
If the window was
And this makes
completely
you
filled up with a TV
the
camera, as
real
it is,
famous person
then
that
an
has
astronaut's
discovered
eye
this
would not be able to
and
get the
reveals
TV
all
camera
this
out of the
stuff.
window, as it
What an
obviously
ego you
appears
must
in
have
his
to want to propel yourself like this.
That's not why I'm doing it, and God knows that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the truth to come out because I think it was wrong.
You can also notice how the
No,
astronaut
but you're doing
operating
it the
the
wrong
camera
way. You don't
reacted
mislead
to this
somebody like me
by
to come in
attempting
here.
to pan
If you
away.
didn't go to the moon, that's misleading people. I'm showing you this
Okay,
tape.
we went to the moon. We're not misleading anybody.
Then how is it possible
This
that
is a
this
segment
is the
that
window
they believed wasn't
it's
even
shot
being recorded,
to make it
much
look
less
like
Look,
this
you
is
can
far away?
manufacture all you want with
This
these
is
things.
straight. This isn't
and the scene was
manufactured.
being
You
Sure.
know that it
to
isn't.
that of an interior of the astronauts at work.
I
And
believe this would
apparently
prove it in a
the
court of law that you did not go to the
spot
moon.
happened
It's
in
dated on the
the
18th. It proves when you remove the
Will you give
crystal.
me your
Here's
business
the light.
card?
They used
It's
to
all
see
in there.
camera controls,
It's all
but
in there.
not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert.
This proves that it's the window. You can see them removing the crescent insert that you did to create the Terminator line in front of
You're
the
so
window.
full of shit, I can't believe it.
Earth orbit.
If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
And we've talked 2 or 3 times since then off the record.
Really?
And he's made it very clear to me I'm right and good luck.
Well, on the day of the punch, he was, according to Wikipedia, which isn't always right, he was 72, which would make him 92 now. Is he really
Yeah,
that
I mean,
old?
they lied several times in there.
Yeah.
They said I had him backed up against a wall when it was
Yeah.
me who was backed up against the wall.
Yeah.
They said I physically poked him with the Bible. I would never do that. I would never touch him. I know better. So they lied. Now, if someone has to lie to prove their point, it means they're in the wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what it means. There was a guy, I forget the website, but he's like the #1, we really went to the moon, don't listen to Bart Sibrel guy. And his article about me, he said, I worked at NBC News for 2 months.
Yeah.
I was there through 2 Thanksgivings and 2 Christmases. It was 2 years.
Yeah.
He said 2 months to discredit me. So first of all, if that was an unintentional mistake, if the guy's so, what's the right word, disorganized, that he can't investigate something here on Earth accurately, how could he possibly know accurately what's going on or not going on the moon? And then secondly, if he lied intentionally, that also proves me right.
Yeah.
Because if you lie intentionally to make your point, it means your point is invalid.
Do you remember that film, a little piece of film a few years ago where Buzz Aldrin is talking to that little girl? I think he's at a school or something, and he's saying, "No, we didn't go to the moon." And that just kind of got very quickly swept under the carpet. But I was thinking at the time, they're either going to have to say he's starting to get dementia or something and is talking absolute nonsense.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
Yeah, he slipped up, and he said they didn't go. And of course, they'll always argue around it. And so that's why in the future, he always has a handler sitting beside him.
Yeah.
Now, this is one thing I want to share. I met a professor of an aerospace university, of one of the major universities in the country, teaching aerospace. And I showed him shadows intersecting that's impossible to happen in sunlight. I showed him a 1-foot model of the Earth from Earth orbit. I showed him the logic that they can't travel 1,000 times further into space in 1969 than today.
Yep.
Technology doesn't go backwards. That proves it was a forgery.
That
And
we
then
go
the
back to
fourth
space,
point
then
is we have an eyewitness.
Yeah.
If I say in court, I swear I saw him shoot the guy, they take it as evidence. So we have a guy who says, I was there when they filmed it at Cannon Air Force Base, told it on his deathbed to get it off of his chest. And there's a video about it, that I just uploaded. I mean, it's on the front page of Sibrel, Sibrel.com. The video's right there. Right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what about this? What if you turn on the TV, there's a press conference. Buzz Aldrin is at a podium tearfully confessing he faked it. It was shot at Cannon Air Force Base. Bart is right. And I'm sorry, please forgive me. The professor of aerospace said, I still think he walked on the moon.
Yeah, no one would believe it. People want to believe that they went to the moon.
Now, how can that guy be teaching a university when his mind is so messed up? The issue is spiritual. Okay, that's the issue. When I turned down the project initially for fear of my life, started believing in God, the reason I changed my mind is it just smelled like there's a spiritual message here, that this represents something. That's why the film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can watch for free at Sibrel.com in the video links, it opens up with the scripture. Where there is pride, then comes disgrace. Yeah. And then we show the Tower of Babel, which they say in the Bible, the only reason they made it is to build a taller building than the neighboring nations so they could show off, never finished. Then millennia go by, mankind builds the largest machine ever built by their hand, the Titanic. And they put in print the ship that God himself could not sink. Tower of Babel never finished.
Yeah.
The Titanic never won voyage. And then Tricky Dick Nixon, when he knew they weren't there, had the audacity to say, putting a man on the moon is the greatest event since creation. And it was just like something told me this is important. This truth has to be known. This truth will be the finger out of the dike more than 9/11, more than who shot JFK, more than anything else, because it affects us so emotionally that when the public finds out, and they may soon, God help us, it'll cause more reform in the government. Hey, maybe the Illuminati want that. They want, basically when I showed this tape to the director of news at NBC, he said, Bart, this absolutely proves they did not go to the moon. And I said, okay, what are you going to do about it? He said, I can't broadcast this. It will cause a civil war. I will not go down in history as the person who caused a civil war.
So do you think we won't see the truth about the moon hoax?
Well,
in our lifetime, or
I thought, as well as many other Americans, especially Black Americans, that they wouldn't see a Black president in their lifetime. And stepping aside whether he was a good person or not, I'm glad it happened. To say that racism is still going on after we've had a Black president twice, I think they're trying to stoke fires there. So fortunately it did. And I said to myself before I popped in that tape, well, we'll never have proof in my lifetime. Whether we win or not, it'll be a theory. I was wrong. And, maybe it'll not come out in my lifetime, but then maybe it will. We'll see.
Well, I hope so. I really do. Can I say thank you very much for joining me? I can't believe how fast that time has gone. Wow.
Yeah, and please show the music video full screen on the way out.
We're going to play it now. I had it all.
Go to Sibrel.com. Help me out. buy a book.
When I was born in '65, Grandma Ruth said never lie. The key to life was only truth. Listen to Grandma, old Ruth. In the Bible, Ruth refused to go until the truth she was to know. Great God man said truth to be, would loose my chains, set me free. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead my train derailed my truth, my dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. A funny thing, my first big film, loved and hated like the heat of a kiln. Hero to some, others wish dead. Hard success, hard head. Astronauts wild, I never flinched. My armor was the truth I pinched. Nervous now that I was groovy, sweaty palms just watching that movie. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead my train derailed my truth, my dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. And cursed, punched in the face, I'm facing this life of the human race. Some say patriot, some say traitor, guess it depends on historical speculators. Astronaut sons of the C.I.A. to take my life far away. Instead the curse fell on his head at 26.
What do you call the C.I.A.?
He's stone cold dead.
Have him whacked?
I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead my train derailed my truth, my dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. Seeds to root, grow up large, a truthful shoot. Then someday when I am old, they'll tell my story I long ago told. Except now they'll say instead of Ruth, Bart's the grandpa of this old truth. Not really true, 'twas Bill before me, and Jesus my brother, waiting for me in glory. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead my train derailed my truth, my dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. like dear old grandma, old Ruth. Love dear old grandpa, old